I'm always grateful. Thank you. My husband continued to smile at me as I washed my work clothes every day for 16 years. I loved him with all my heart, as he was just as kind as when we first got married. Yes. Until then, I thought, what, this is impossible. One day, I saw some paint on the bottom of my work clothes and realized something. At that moment, my happy days collapsed with a sound. I was shocked and my spine froze, and I secretly disappeared from my husband in the middle of the night. I married my husband, Nobuyoshi, who I met through an acquaintance at the age of 25. He had a gentle personality and was a kind person who cared about me even for small things. We were not particularly wealthy, but we were a very ordinary couple, and we lived a happy life together. However, there was one worry in such a peaceful life. One day, we visited our parents' house to check on my father, who lives alone. Dad came to play. Please come in. How have you been? When I greeted him cheerfully after him, my father frowned. Did you come too? I didn't call you. I sighed in my heart at the cold gaze directed at my husband. What was bothering me was my father's attitude towards Makoto. To begin with, he was very against us getting married. Even after I somehow managed to convince him and we became a married couple, he didn't even try to speak to my husband. However, I had a hunch about the reason for his attitude. My father was the president of a major car manufacturer, and Shiji also worked in the group as an auto mechanic. Although we worked in different places, we were from the same company, so perhaps she was being more strict with my husband than necessary. Shiji was aware of this and was trying to walk towards my father somehow. I am both a family member and an employee, so I want to support my father in every way. However, his words still didn't reach my father. I have nothing to ask of you. Come on, go home now. He always rejects my active interest in his work. I felt sorry for my father's attitude, so I always bowed to my husband on the way home. I'm really sorry. He's not always like that. It's okay. I'm the one who wants to get along with my father. I'll try my best to get him to accept me as soon as possible. I was saved by Shiji, who patted me on the shoulder with a smile, even though I was feeling uncomfortable. At the same time, I also felt more and more helpless towards my father. I wish he would be a little happy about my happiness. My father raised me alone, in place of my mother who died at the same time as I was born. I was very grateful to him for continuing to shower me with love even though he was in a difficult position as a president. That's why I felt sorry for my father, who disliked my husband. I loved the two of them so much that I hoped they would get along someday. However, even after trying and failing, the distance between my father and Shiji did not narrow. Meanwhile, our relationship is still good. I washed his work clothes every night, hoping to be of some help as a wife. My husband repairs cars at work, and his clothes always had stubborn stains on them, and they would not come off unless I washed them by hand. And he smiled gently at me every time. I'm always grateful. Thank you so much. Just seeing the happy face of Shinji gave me strength. Of course, it wasn't all happy things, but as we continued our married life, we also had some difficult times. Perhaps my responsibilities were increasing as the years went by. I increasingly heard Shinji complain about his difficulties at work. Each time, I encouraged him by saying that I would support the household finances if it was too hard. I was also working, so we had enough financial resources to lose even if Shinji quit his job. However, perhaps my feelings reached him, as he never quit his job in the end. After that, we continued to support each other and lived as a married couple for about 16 years. At the time, I had no doubt that our happy days would continue. Until that day, a major incident that I will never forget occurred, and it was a phone call from the hospital in the evening that told me the tragedy. Oh, my father was waiting for my husband to come home at home, and I accidentally dropped my cell phone. It was the news that my father had been rushed to the hospital. Apparently, he had been hit many times by someone at donkey on his way home from work, and was found lying on the ground. After hearing the story, I hurried to the hospital in disbelief. And as soon as I arrived at the hospital room, I collapsed on the spot. Dad, why did this happen? My father was wrapped in bandages and had bones all over his body lying on the bed. According to the doctor, he was in a very dangerous condition and the culprit had not yet been found. I absolutely do not want to say goodbye like this. I clenched my fists as tears flowed. Why did my kind-hearted father have to go through this? My heart was a mess with anger and sadness. And it was my husband who came to the hospital after work who comforted me. He will surely be saved. It will definitely be fine. In the end, I returned to the hospital with Misato's support that day, and my husband took care of me after we got home. I will choose my own work today. Please take a rest. My husband made me sit on the sofa and was about to go to the sink. But I stopped him and slowly shook my head. Because I had been washing my work almost every day for 16 years, it would have been better if I had rested. Please let me do it again today. Besides, it would be more nerve-wracking to do something. Is that so? If you say so, I'll leave it to you, but don't push yourself. Then I took the work from my worried husband and headed to the sink. I took a deep breath, looking at my face in the mirror after crying. I was worried about my father, and my anger towards the perpetrator had not subsided, but I had a kind husband. I couldn't let Makoto have any unnecessary worries, so I had to be strong. Thinking of my husband who had always been by my side, I slapped him on the cheek and re-energized myself, and checked my work again. Then I noticed red paint on the hem of my work. Oh no, that's bad. I wonder if it will come off. I thought it was probably from when I was painting the car, so I immediately picked up a special detergent. But then I stared at the stain. And the next moment, I realized something and my spine froze. I was so shocked that I froze with my work skills in my hands. However, my head, which continued to move against my body, came up with one possibility. So I disappeared in the middle of the night when my husband was asleep to confirm the idea. 3 days later, in the evening, my father was still sleeping in his private room at the hospital. Meanwhile, a figure creeps up to the bed. A tall man wearing dirty work clothes. The figure stares down at my father with a blank expression. Then, after a few seconds, he slowly reaches out to the bed as if he has lost his mind. But the next moment, I jumped out of the locker where I was hiding. Wait. He shook his shoulders at my sudden appearance. Oh, no, it was my husband, Makoto, standing there with his eyes wide open. After a moment of silence, he pulled his hand back and gave me a fake smile. Why did he go there? Or rather, where had he been up until now? In fact, I hadn't been home even once since he disappeared that day, and I hadn't returned his messages. Ignoring Makoto was something I would never have thought of until recently. But at that time, I had already given up on being married to him. Because it was his law that had betrayed me first. What on earth did you come here to do? Of course it was to visit him. You contacted me because the Yodai had stabilized, right? I glared at him, and he approached me with an awkward smile. A few hours before, I had emailed my husband to tell him that my father had passed the peak. But it was all just a plan to call him here. Visiting him? What a lie. You've come to kill your father this time, haven't you? I brushed off the hand that tried to touch my shoulder as usual, and distanced myself from him. My husband's eyes widened at my words, but seeing him still not say anything, I clenched my fists in frustration and anger. He thought that if my father was gone, the company would be his. Or maybe he was after the inheritance that was to be passed on to me. I deliberately provoked him, and my husband finally wavered. At that time, somewhere in my heart, I still hoped that Shinji would take the initiative. After all, I had trusted him for the past 16 years. But unfortunately, my prayers did not seem to reach my husband. What are you talking about? I was just worried about my father. I know you're worried about making a mistake, but aren't you just a little tired? I slumped my shoulders in despair at his words, which tried to deny everything. Even my faint hopes up until then were shattered, and I was completely disappointed in my husband. Then, a low voice echoed in the hospital room as if to support me. What your daughter is saying is right. Whoosh. The next moment, Shiji looked down again and jumped up in surprise. That's because my father, who was supposed to be asleep, had his eyes wide open and was staring at my husband. Why should he not have regained consciousness just because his condition had stabilized? That's a lie. I was already awake the day after you attacked me. Shiji froze as he glared at me, passing over my body. My husband's betrayal, Shiji himself was the culprit beyond the incident. And my father, who had safely regained consciousness, remembered being attacked by him clearly. So he confessed to me, who had come to visit him, that he had been a vandal. In the first place, he had always thought you were suspicious. For example, he would repeatedly ask about the president's work, and would ask about the company's financial situation. And according to the story, the reason my father hated my husband was because he could see his ulterior motives for taking over the company. It seemed that Shiji had been secretly aiming for the position of president when I wasn't looking. Still, my father had kept quiet about the fact for the happiness of his child, seeing me as he was betraying my husband without knowing anything. However, when I found out the truth, I was furious and decided to sell my trust to protect my beloved father. I thought that if I told you that the affair had stabilized, you would come and kill my father again. I also testified. You can't run away. While staying close to my father, I looked firmly at the truth. It is true that it was thanks to him that we were able to live a happy life for the past 16 years. However, I couldn't forgive him for putting my precious father through such a thing and then trying to run away. Then, the next moment, Shiji finally showed me the book. Oh, damn it. I put up with it and married an ugly girl like you. His face was red, and he slammed his fist into the wall and glared at us. According to him, G married me to take our family's money or the president. However, my father didn't take it seriously, and even though I hinted that my work was difficult, I didn't ask for my family's money. Shiji was always jealous and playing the role of a good husband. And when it was time for him to resign, my father didn't bring up the president's story, and I finally exploded with frustration. I lost patience and resorted to the ostracism of attacking him and making him cry. How awful he's been. Deceiving us all this time. Of course. But you guys didn't do what you wanted, so I had to take action. I was horrified when I saw my husband staggering and opening his eyes wide, looking like a different person. I never dreamed that the person I loved was like this. It was my father, not my husband, who was really thinking about my happiness. In the end, there's no proof that I did it. Maybe this old man is mistaken. I bit my lip as I saw the man laughing triumphantly. Even after all this, he showed no remorse, so I finally resorted to my last resort. There was blood on his hands. The moment my husband heard my words, his eyebrows twitched. The reason I left the house secretly that day. It was because when I was trying to wash the work, I noticed a small amount of blood mixed with the peak. The amount of blood was large for a small cut, and my husband did not appear to have any noticeable injuries. Since I knew about my father's incident, I had a bad feeling, so I submitted the work to the police as a half-god, and it was discovered that it was my father's work. It's a lie. I checked it many times. I guess he never thought that there would be evidence left behind. I drew a picture with the date, and when he showed his first weakness, I took a step closer. You probably didn't notice because it was mixed in with the peak, but I knew because I saw the stains on the work every day. Shiji's face was completely pale and he shook his lips. The trigger that exposed the truth and cornered him was the love I had been pouring out on him for 16 years. Then suddenly the door to the hospital room opened and the security guard in the hallway came inside. My father had secretly called the nurse to let the outside know the situation. Oh, no. Tell me. My life won't be broken in a place like this. Shinji struggles as he is held down by the security guard. I sighed as I looked at the pitiful figure of the person who had been my irreplaceable partner until a few days before. I hope you will reflect on the lies you have been telling. Chi was taken away by the security guards, groaning. My father and I held hands and saw him off. After that, the stains on his work skills and my father's testimony were the deciding factors, and Shinji was arrested. He will not be able to leave the army for a while, and he was allowed to claim 6 million yen in compensation. Even if he atoned for his crime, he lost both his money and his job. Far from getting what he wanted, he had wasted 16 years of his life. Meanwhile, I divorced Shinji and moved in with my father, who had fully recovered. When I apologized for my misunderstanding, he smiled cheerfully. Don't worry about that. Mrs. Happiness is always Dad's happiness. Those kind words warmed my heart. For my father who always thought of me, I intend to live my life in my own way.